The sky over South Lecky had just begun to blush with the golden hues of morning when Rena stepped off the workers' shuttle and walked up the private road leading to D'Souza Mansion. She adjusted her cheap canvas satchel on her shoulder and took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh scent of bougainvillea that curled over the compound's front gates. The D'Souza estate stood silent, regal, and detached from the world, with its white stone walls, manicured hedges, and three-story mansion trimmed in marble and gold. For a girl like Rena, born in the shadow of Lagos's forgotten neighborhoods, the gates felt like the border to another planet. Rena was only 19, but had been working here for a little over a year. She had been hired as a junior housekeeper, under strict conditions: stay silent, be invisible, and do the job with precision. She followed the rules, always. Not because she feared losing the job, but because this job had saved her. After her mother's death 2 years ago, life had spiraled into chaos. Her younger brother had dropped out of school. They owed rent. And their only inheritance was a chipped photograph of their mother in a threadbare frame and a small diary she had hidden under her pillow. As Rena entered the side entrance and changed into her uniform, a plain navy dress with white cuffs, she reminded herself, like she did every day, "You're here to survive, not to dream." The mansion was mostly empty on weekday mornings. Mr. Lionel D'Souza, the billionaire businessman, was usually off to meetings by 7. His grown children, Nicole, Julian, and Isabel, rarely came home unless there was a gala or a family crisis. Only the staff filled the space with motion. Gardeners clipped hedges, cooks whispered over marinated meats, cleaners polished. The ancient chandeliers and century-old wooden floors that echoed with a grandeur no one ever dared challenge. Rena's task that day was to dust the private library, a grand, high-ceilinged room she rarely entered. The butler handed her the key without a word, as if to say, "Don't touch anything except the surfaces." She nodded quietly and walked into the one room that felt like a museum, wrapped in silence. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, some so old their leather spines had faded to near blankness. A grandfather clock ticked in a corner, its gentle rhythm a lonely song. Paintings of D'Souza ancestors hung on the walls, fierce eyes, powdered wigs, gold-framed judgments. But the most striking piece in the room was the massive desk in the center, deep mahogany, glossy and trimmed with brass. The top was spotless, not a single pen out of place. Behind it stood a tall, locked cabinet, and beside it, a vintage chest of drawers. As Rena began dusting the desk, her rag swiped across a small silver-framed photo of a woman, not Mrs. D'Souza. This one was different. The woman had dark curls and eyes that seemed to glow even in the still image. There was something familiar about her smile, but Rena dismissed the thought and returned to her task. That's when she noticed the bottom drawer of the chest slightly open. Curiosity. It was not her job to be curious, but something about the gap called to her, a whisper from the past. She hesitated, eyes scanning the room, then knelt down and gently pulled it open. Inside lay a small navy velvet box. She blinked. It was the kind used by upscale jewelers, the kind her mother had only seen in TV dramas. Rena's fingers trembled as she lifted the box. She didn't open it right away. She just stared at it, her heart beating faster. Why would this be tucked away like a secret? She slowly lifted the lid. Inside sat a ring. But not just any ring. It was a delicate gold band shaped like a vine, with 2 tiny rubies forming the petals of a flower and a faint inscription engraved on the inner loop. "For my one wild rose, LD." The room began to spin. Rena knew this ring. She had seen it 100 times before, circling her mother's finger in the flickering light of their kerosene lamp. Her mother, Adaobi, never spoke of the ring. She only smiled at it sometimes, kissed it softly, then turned the stone inward like she was hiding a secret. It had gone missing years before her death. Rena had asked about it once. Her mother only said, "Some memories are better locked away." Tears welled in Rena's eyes as her fingers traced the delicate petals. There was no doubt. This was her mother's ring. But how had it ended up in this house? In this drawer? In the mansion of a man who ruled industries and graced magazine covers? She gently placed the box on the desk and rummaged further into the drawer. Beneath a stack of leather-bound notebooks and sealed envelopes, she found another item, a photograph, yellowed with age, and her world stopped. It was a picture of her mother, younger, brighter, standing beside a man in a crisp white shirt, a younger Lionel D'Souza. They were laughing, looking like two souls wrapped in the warmth of a sunset. Rena dropped the rag. It felt like she couldn't breathe. Her hands trembled. Her mother's eyes in the photo were filled with life, love, and something else, trust. A trust Rena had never seen in her before. The door creaked behind her. She turned sharply, clutching the photo to her chest. Mr. D'Souza stood in the doorway. He was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his tie loosened and briefcase in hand. He looked tired, but not unkind. His eyes, however, locked instantly on the photo in Rena's hands. A long silence. "What are you doing?" His voice was calm, but the edge was undeniable. I didn't mean to pry, sir," Rena stammered, her knees shaking. "I was dusting, and the drawer was already open, and I saw this." She turned the photo slowly to face him. His breath caught, visibly. He walked slowly to the desk, staring at the picture like it was a ghost. His briefcase dropped to the ground without a sound. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice hoarse. "In your drawer," she said softly, lowering the picture to the velvet box. "That ring was my mother's. Her name was Adaobi." His face went pale. He sat down heavily in the chair behind the desk, as if his body couldn't support the weight of what he'd just heard. "Adaobi?" he whispered. "Your mother was Adaobi?" "Yes," Rena said. "She raised me alone. She died 2 years ago. We used to live in a small town in Anambra. She never told me much about my father, just that she met a man once, and he gave her that ring." He covered his face with both hands. "Oh my God." Rena stepped back, overwhelmed by the silence stretching between them. She said, "He was kind," Rena added, "but his phone stopped working, and she never saw him again." Mr. D'Souza looked up. His eyes were wet. "That's because I lost that phone," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to fly back the next week. I didn't even know." He trailed off, staring at her. This girl with her mother's eyes. "You're her daughter?" he said again, like saying it aloud might change fate. Rena nodded slowly, her heart racing. I think you might be my father." There was no explosion, no screaming, just a stillness so deep it pressed into the walls. Lionel leaned back, blinking rapidly. "We need to find out," he said quietly. "Now." He stood, reaching for his car keys. "We'll go to the hospital. I'll call my doctor. We'll take the test today." "Sir, no more, sir," he said gently. "Just call me Lionel." Rena didn't move. This couldn't be happening. She had come here to mop floors. And now the man who built empires was standing before her with trembling hands, whispering the possibility that he was her father. The ring lay in its velvet box, glinting under the soft light. It had waited years to be found. A circle of gold. A promise forgotten. A truth buried. And now, in one quiet morning, that truth was rising again. The black Mercedes SUV moved like a shadow through the streets of Lagos, weaving through traffic with silent urgency. Inside, the air was heavy with thoughts neither of them could speak yet. Rena sat by the window, clutching the photograph of her mother, Adaobi, to her chest as though it was the only anchor she had left in a world that had turned upside down. Beside her, Lionel D'Souza sat tense, one hand gripping the steering wheel too tightly, the other resting on his thigh, his fingers twitching like they were holding back 20 years of regret. He hadn't spoken much since they left the mansion, only a few calls, one to his private doctor, another to clear his schedule. But his silence wasn't empty. It screamed. Rena could feel it every time she looked at him from the corner of her eye. This man, this mogul with glass towers in his name and a face that graced Forbes, looked broken. Not publicly, but inside. She tried to slow her breathing, counting to 4 with every inhale. She had cleaned his shoes, polished his floors, eaten leftover toast off his breakfast trays when the cook wasn't looking. And now she was sitting beside him. Not as staff, but as something more, something terrifying. The possible daughter of a man who once promised her mother a future and never returned. Outside the window, the tall buildings blurred. School children in uniform rushed across zebra crossings. Vendors shouted under makeshift umbrellas. Life moved on, unaware of the chaos erupting inside 2 hearts in the back of a luxury car. Lionel cleared his throat finally, but his voice came out low like he was afraid of it. Your mother, Adaobi, she was studying nursing when I met her. Is that right? Rena turned, surprised he remembered. Yes, she said softly. She was top of her class, but she had to drop out after I was born. She never really talked about it. She didn't hate me? He asked, not as a CEO or a man used to command, but like a boy begging to know he hadn't ruined everything. No, Rena said. She never hated you. She only ever said, maybe you didn't know. Lionel exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. His voice cracked. I didn't. Rena, I swear to you, if I had known, if I had even suspected, things would have been different. The car slowed as they pulled into the side entrance of Westwood Private Hospital, one of the most exclusive clinics in the city. The gates opened without question. Lionel was known here. People bowed, staff stood straighter. But today he walked like a man unsure of his place in the world. Rena followed, gripping her satchel and trying to hide the fray in her shoes. A nurse ushered them into a private suite, away from curious eyes. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and lavender. A doctor in a navy coat entered moments later. A calm-looking man in his early 40s with glasses that slid to the edge of his nose. Chief D'Souza, he greeted. I've been briefed. You want a DNA test run today? Yes, Lionel said. As quickly as possible. The doctor nodded and turned to Rena. Are you comfortable with this, miss? Rena nodded. She was more than comfortable. She needed answers. Her mother had died with too many questions left unanswered, and Rena refused to carry that silence forward. The procedure was simple. A buccal swab. 2 samples. One from Lionel. One from Rena. The doctor labeled the vials carefully and assured them that the results would be ready within a few hours, and so they waited. In the private lounge, Lionel sat across from her, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. After some time, he spoke again. She wore that ring every day, he said quietly. I gave it to her after 3 weeks of knowing her. Crazy, right? But I'd never felt anything like that before. She made me feel alive again. Rena swallowed, hard. Why didn't you ever come back? Lionel's eyes closed for a moment. We met in Ibadan. I was there for a construction bid. I only stayed 3 nights. We talked for hours on the rooftop of her hostel. She laughed like no one had ever laughed around me before. She gave me that photo and asked if I'd call when I got back to Lagos. And I did. For days. He paused. But on the day I was supposed to return to her, I lost my phone. And with it, her number. I tried asking around, tried calling mutual contacts. But I didn't know her last name. I didn't even know where she lived. Only her school. He looked up at Rena. By the time I went back to the campus, she was gone. Transferred, they said. Left no address. Rena listened without blinking. Her heart cracked. A slow, quiet sound no one else could hear. She cried for you, she whispered. So many nights. She believed you'd come back. Then when her belly started to show, she stopped smiling. Lionel pressed his fingers to his eyes. I failed her. She forgave you, Rena said, but she never stopped waiting. They sat in silence, two strangers tethered by a woman who had loved and lost in silence. Hours passed like lifetimes. When the door finally opened, and the doctor returned with an envelope, Rena stood so fast her knees knocked the table. Lionel stood slowly, hands trembling. The doctor didn't say a word. He handed the envelope to Lionel. The room went deathly still. Lionel opened it. His eyes scanned the lines, then stopped. Rena watched his face morph, shock, then disbelief. Then something indescribable. He looked at her. The paper shook in his hands. Rena, he breathed. It's true, you're mine. Her heart exploded in her chest. The world blurred as she swayed on her feet. She couldn't stop the tears this time. They flowed freely, hot and heavy. Lionel reached for her just as her legs gave out, and he caught her in his arms like she was the most fragile thing he had ever held. You're my daughter, he whispered again. My daughter. She cried into his chest. For every night her mother waited, for every birthday without a name on the cake, for every time she had been called the help when she was, in fact, blood. Lionel didn't move. He just held her. And when he finally pulled back, he placed the velvet ring box in her palm. Your mother's, and now yours. This was never just a ring. It was a promise I failed to keep. But I will not fail you. That night, they returned to the mansion. This time, Rena didn't enter through the servant's door. She walked through the front beside Lionel as the staff stood stunned. She wasn't wearing a designer dress. She didn't walk like royalty, but she walked with truth, and that was stronger than gold. What awaited her inside would test every part of her soul. Jealous siblings, whispered rumors, and a world that would never truly believe where she came from. But she had one thing they didn't. She had her mother's courage, and now, for the first time, she had a father, too. The D'Souza mansion had never felt so quiet. Not even on the stormiest nights or during the holidays when all the siblings were away. This silence was different. It was the kind of silence that swelled just before a storm. Thick, uncertain, and unbreathable. Rena stood at the threshold of the main hallway, her shoes sinking into the soft white carpet that had once been forbidden territory. Her maid uniform was gone. She now wore a soft blue blouse and dark trousers, freshly gifted by Lionel. The fabric still smelled like the shopping mall they'd rushed through that evening, a desperate attempt to clothe her in something worthy of the news about to be dropped like a grenade on the family. Lionel walked beside her, no longer composed and controlled, but strangely human. His voice had softened over the past hours. He looked older now, though not weaker. There was something raw in his eyes, like he'd spent years building an empire while unknowingly leaving a kingdom of his own blood behind. Are you ready? He asked her. Rena nodded slowly, but in truth she wasn't. How could she be? He reached out and gently squeezed her shoulder. They deserve to know. I won't hide you. Then he called out, "Nicole, Julian, Isabel, come downstairs." Now, his voice rang through the mansion, firm and final. One by one they appeared. Nicole was first. The eldest, dressed in silk and diamonds even at home. She glided down the stairs with suspicion in her eyes. Julian followed next, tall, athletic, and always unreadable behind his designer glasses. Then Isabel, the youngest, barefoot, still, clutching her phone and frowning. "What's going on?" Nicole asked sharply. "Who is she?" Lionel took a breath. "This is Rena." Rena smiled nervously, unsure where to put her hands. Nicole looked her up and down, frowning harder. "The maid?" "Not anymore," Lionel said gently. "She's your sister." Silence fell like a blade. "What?" Julian asked, blinking. Nicole scoffed. "Excuse me?" Lionel continued, his voice steady. "I met her mother many years ago. Before your mother and I got serious. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't even know where she had gone. Today, Rena found a photograph in my drawer, and it led us here." He reached into his breast pocket and handed the DNA results to Julian, who grabbed them skeptically. "Positive," Julian read aloud. 99.9% probability." He dropped the envelope on the nearby table like it burned his fingers. "Are you serious right now?" Nicole snapped. "You're just going to walk in here with a stranger and call her our sister?" "She's not a stranger," Lionel said firmly. "She is my daughter. She is blood. She's the housekeeper," Isabel muttered. "You're telling me the girl who cleaned my mirror last week is family?" Lionel turned to face them all fully. "Yes, and you will treat her with respect." "No." Nicole crossed her arms, her gold bracelet jangling. "You don't get to show up with a charity case and demand we play happy family. This changes everything. Our family, our name, our legacy. Do you know what the media will do with this?" "I don't care what the media thinks," Lionel said. "What matters is the truth." Nicole laughed bitterly. "Is that what this is to you? Some noble redemption story?" Julian stayed silent. He leaned against the railing, jaw clenched, eyes focused on Rena. "Say something." Lionel pressed him. Julian's voice was calm, too calm. "I believe the science, but I don't know her, and I don't know what she wants." Rena finally stepped forward, her voice low but clear. "I don't want anything." Nicole rolled her eyes. "Sure. Just walked into a billionaire's life out of the goodness of your heart." "I didn't walk into anything," Rena said, holding her ground. "I've been here, cleaning your mess, folding your clothes, serving your meals. I didn't ask for this." "But you're staying," Nicole snapped. "I don't know," Rena said honestly. "I haven't decided." Nicole's eyes narrowed. "Then let me decide for you. Leave." "Enough." Lionel's voice echoed off the high ceilings. "You don't get to make that call. I do, and I say she stays." He turned to Rena. "You are my daughter, and I will protect you." Rena's eyes stung. She hadn't expected acceptance, but this outright hostility, was still a dagger she didn't know how to pull out. Nicole turned and stormed upstairs. Julian followed silently. Isabel lingered for a moment, her eyes softening, just slightly. Then she too disappeared into the darkness. Lionel walked Rena into the guest wing and opened a door she had never seen before. The room was soft with pastel walls, a private bathroom, and a bed that looked like clouds. A desk stood in the corner, and by the window, a cushioned armchair and a side table with fresh flowers. "I had this room redone last year," Lionel said. "Didn't know why at the time, now I do." Rena sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't cry, not until Lionel placed the velvet box in her hand again. "She would have wanted you to have it," he said. "I still don't understand how it got here," she whispered. Lionel's eyes darkened with memory. Adeobi gave it to me the night I left Ibadan, said it was a promise ring. I couldn't wear it, obviously, so I kept it. Carried it from house to house, year after year. But I never opened the box again. He looked at her, and this time his eyes were full of something she hadn't seen before. Awe. You look so much like her. That night, Rena lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But tonight she had a father, and in a house full of strangers, that was enough. The first morning after the truth came out, Rena awoke to the sound of birdsong outside her new window. A soft, warbling melody that danced with the early light spilling through the sheer white curtains. The room was beautiful, like a dream, stitched from the pages of magazines she used to collect from street vendors' bins. But no matter how soft the bed or sweet the perfume of fresh linen, the air in the mansion had changed. It wasn't just the silence, it was the tension. A subtle chill that lurked in every polished corner. She rose quietly, still unused to her new reality. She moved through the room like a visitor in her own life, afraid to touch too much. When she opened her wardrobe, lined with new clothes Lionel had insisted on buying, her hands hesitated. She chose the plainest dress, a simple beige outfit with a cotton belt, and pulled her hair back in a low braid. Nothing flashy, nothing provocative. She didn't want to look like someone trying to claim anything. All she wanted was peace, a place to breathe. Downstairs, the dining room smelled of coffee and toast. The long mahogany table gleamed already, set with fine porcelain and silver cutlery. Lionel sat at the head of the table, flipping through a newspaper. He looked up as she entered and offered her a tired but genuine smile. "Good morning, sweetheart." She returned a quiet "good morning" and took her seat near him. Nicole walked in moments later, wearing a sleek emerald green suit and heels that clacked loudly against the tile. Sharp, intentional sounds. She glanced at Rena, said nothing, and took her seat without a word. Julian followed, silent and unreadable. Isabel trailed in last, yawning, dressed in a hoodie and leggings. Lionel folded the paper. "I have an announcement." Nicole rolled her eyes. "Another one?" "I've informed the board of Rena's status. She's officially recognized as my daughter, and I'm initiating the legal process to have her name amended accordingly." Julian dropped his spoon with a soft clatter. Isabel's eyes widened. Nicole's mouth twisted. "You're serious?" Nicole said. "Yes," Lionel replied. Nicole set down her coffee cup, pushed her chair back slowly, and stood. "I need air," she muttered, then turned and walked out. Julian didn't say anything. He merely stirred his coffee, gaze fixed on nothing. Breakfast ended in silence. Later that day, the storm truly began. Rena had stepped out into the garden with a book, something Lionel had given her from the library, titled The Anatomy of the Heart. He said it might inspire her if she still wished to pursue medicine. She sat near the fountain, the gentle trickle of water calming her nerves. That's when she overheard it. Two maids were talking by the kitchen windows. "She's not even that pretty," one whispered. "Doesn't matter. She's in now. Blood or not. They say she's getting access to the trust." Rena's heart sank. She turned the page, pretending she didn't hear. A gardener passed her without greeting. That never happened before. Whispers followed her like shadows that day. Every staff member she passed wore polite masks, but their eyes were curious, suspicious. By evening, it was worse. At dinner, only Lionel, Rena, and Isabel were present. Nicole and Julian hadn't shown up. "Where are they?" Lionel asked. "The butler." "They've gone to meet their attorneys, sir," he replied. Lionel frowned. That night, Rena sat on her bed, flipping through her mother's old diary. On the last page, her mother had written in faded ink, "If truth ever finds her, may she rise, not with bitterness, but grace. She is more than my daughter. She is my prayer answered." The next morning, an envelope was slid under her door. No name. Just a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with words typed in sharp black font. She was a maid. Her mother was nothing but a liar. Do you think you belong here? You will never be one of us, and soon everyone will know who you truly are. No signature, no return address. Rena clutched the note, her chest tightening. Her breath came in short bursts. She marched straight to Lionel's study, the note in hand. He was pacing already, phone in one hand. When she handed it to him, his jaw clenched. Who gave you this? I found it under my door this morning. He read it again and again, then crumpled it in his fist. I'll find out who sent this, but Rena already knew. The ink may have been anonymous. But the venom was familiar. Later that evening, Rena passed Nicole in the hallway. Their eyes met. You dropped something? Nicole said casually, her voice a blade coated in silk. I didn't, Rena replied. Funny how trash always finds its way back into the house. Rena paused. If you hate me, fine, but don't insult my mother. Nicole laughed bitterly. Your mother, she seduced a man above her station and trapped him. Classic. She loved him, Rena said, steady but shaking. And he loved her. Nicole stepped closer. You may have blood, but you'll never have the name. Not truly. You don't belong here. Rena's voice dropped. I didn't ask to. I didn't beg for this. All I ever wanted was to know where I came from. Nicole stared at her, then stepped back. You'll wish you never found out. That night, Rena didn't sleep. But she didn't cry either. Instead, she wrote a letter to herself. I will not let them break me. I will walk with my head high, even if my knees tremble, because I carry more than blood. I carry my mother's name, her dreams, her prayers, and I will not be erased. The next day, Lionel made another announcement. Rena would be enrolled at Lagos Central College of Health Sciences. He had spoken to the dean himself, and the tuition, fully paid. Nicole didn't show up to breakfast for 3 days after that. But Rena did, every single day. She sat at the table, greeted everyone, and ate her toast slowly, even as whispers still floated, because she knew. The war had started, but so had her healing. 3 days after Rena received the anonymous letter, the mansion's silence was shattered by a storm more public than anyone could have imagined. It started with a phone vibrating on the marble countertop in the kitchen. Mrs. Belinda, the head. Cook glanced at it and let out a small gasp. A second later, a younger maid dropped her broom as a notification popped up on her cracked phone screen. Then the whispers began. Quick, scattered, poisoned. Rena had just stepped out of the shower when her phone lit up with 10 unread messages from friends back home in Ajagunle. Is this you? Tell me this isn't real. It's all over Twitter. You trending, oh! Her heart sank. She opened one of the links and froze. It was a blog post on a gossip site called Elite Eyes Nigeria, titled D'Souza Scandal. Billionaire claims Maid is his lost daughter, gold digger or genuine. Below it was a photo. Her photo. Taken at the hospital parking lot when Lionel had taken her for the DNA test. She had been holding his arm. There were hundreds of comments. This girl planned everything. She targeted him. That's not even a real ring she's wearing. Where did she get it? Another maid looking for an upgrade. Paternity scam. Rich men should be careful. Rena's hands trembled. Her ears rang. She clutched her towel tighter and sat on the edge of the bed. Her eyes burned, but the tears didn't come, just a kind of frozen stillness, like her body had forgotten how to move. She wasn't ready for this. Not the world's cruelty. Not the headlines that erased her truth. Not the war of perception. There was a soft knock on her door. It was Isabel. Rena, she said gently. Dad wants to see you, in the study. Rena nodded and got dressed slowly, carefully. Not because she wanted to look nice, but because she didn't want to give the world any more ammunition. She wore a navy blue dress with long sleeves and tied her hair into a tight bun. Simple, strong. When she stepped into the study, Lionel was pacing. 2 phones were ringing on his desk. His assistant sat nearby, furiously typing something into a laptop. News tickers flashed across a silent TV screen on the wall. He turned the moment he saw her. "I just saw it," Rena said, her voice quiet but shaking. He nodded. His face was tight with anger. "Someone leaked it, a staff member or someone else. But we're going to fix this." "I didn't ask for any of this," she whispered. "I know," he said, stepping toward her. "And I swear to you, Rena, no one will take this from you. I feel like I'm drowning, like I'm being dragged through mud I never even stepped in." Lionel looked down at her, guilt carved into every line of his face. "I failed your mother once. I won't fail you too. We'll get ahead of this." The assistant stood. "Sir, the media team is suggesting a formal press release, something that repositions the narrative and frames her background as a strength, not a scandal." "I'm not a narrative," Rena muttered, stepping back. Lionel's expression softened. "I know, but in this world, people don't wait for the truth. We have to give them a reason to see you for who you really are." Rena clenched her fists. "Then let me speak." Everyone in the room went still. "What?" Lionel asked. "I want to speak for myself," she said, louder now. "Not a press release written by strangers. Let me say it. Let me tell the world who I am." Lionel hesitated, then slowly nodded. "All right." The next morning, Rena stood in the mansion's courtyard garden before a single camera, wearing a modest dress and no makeup. Just her voice. Just her heart. She didn't use a script, just her mother's diary clutched in one hand. "My name is Rena Adaobi D'Souza," she began, voice steady. "I was born to a woman named Adaobi who never lied to me. She raised me, alone, worked 3 jobs, and died too young. I found out who my father was only recently, and yes, it changed my life. But not the way people think." She paused, breathing in. "I never wanted fame. Or money. I just wanted the truth. And the truth is that blood doesn't come with instructions. It comes with responsibility. I am not here to take. I am here to heal, to learn, to grow, and to carry my mother's name with pride, no matter what you call me in the comments." Then she stepped away. That night, Lionel sat beside her in the garden with his laptop open. "You're trending," he said softly. Rena smiled faintly. "Still calling me a gold digger?" "Some," he admitted. "But others are defending you, sharing your speech, calling it powerful." She sighed. "It's strange. I spent my whole life being invisible. Now I wish I could disappear again." "I know that feeling," Lionel said. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Lionel reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. He handed it to her. "You said once you wanted to become a doctor. I pulled some strings. I know a few board members at Lagos College of Medicine." Her eyes widened. Inside was a sealed letter. She tore it open, her heart stilled. "Congratulations. You have been accepted to the Lagos College of Medicine. Your admission is effective this semester. Full scholarship. Accommodation provided." Rena's breath hitched. "But I never even completed my application." "You didn't have to," Lionel said with a small smile. "I finished it. I submitted your school records. Your essay was in your diary." Her mouth fell open. "You read my diary?" "Only the parts where you talked about your dreams," he said gently. "The rest, I knew was for your mother." Tears finally spilled over her cheeks. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll go," he said. "I will." They hugged again, longer this time. But somewhere beyond the garden walls, beyond the glowing approval letters and tender embraces, the storm hadn't yet passed, because the hand that leaked her story hadn't revealed their face, and they weren't finished. The morning Rena stepped onto the campus of Lagos College of Medicine, the sky was a pale blue and the air smelled like damp chalk and fresh ambition. Around her, students buzzed with nervous energy, some in tailored blazers, others in white, coats already worn like armor. She stood at the gates alone, her admission letter folded neatly in her bag, and her heart tucked somewhere between her throat and the soles of her feet. It felt like a rebirth and a battlefield, because she wasn't. Just stepping into school, she was stepping out of a scandal. Her name still whispered across blogs. Though the news cycle had started to move on, digital stains didn't wash out easily. A few classmates stared longer than necessary. A girl passing by with a textbook clutched to her chest turned around twice before muttering to her friend, "That's the billionaire's maid, right? Or daughter? Or both?" Rena pretended not to hear. She wore a simple white blouse and navy slacks. No designer label, no gold watch, no family name etched on a lanyard. Just her mother's old diary hidden in her bag, wrapped in a Ziploc, too, protected from rain and tears. That and a small bronze necklace with a faded charm shaped like a stethoscope. A gift her mother had given her on her 13th birthday with whispered hope. "You'll be a doctor one day, my Rena. I can feel it." She held on to those words as she walked through lecture halls and registration lines, as she signed her name next to classmates who barely looked her way, as she answered roll calls and found her way to the library. She didn't speak much, but she watched everything. Every hallway, every instructor, every face. She was not here to be liked. She was here to become. Back at the mansion, the air had cooled. The media frenzy had passed, but the shadows lingered. Nicole still refused to speak to Rena. Julian kept his distance, always courteous but cold, like an executive dealing with a controversial memo. Only Isabel had softened. One night, while Rena was studying on the veranda, Isabel placed a cup of warm tea beside her and muttered, "You forgot dinner again." She walked away before Rena could reply. But the next night, she brought her tea again. Lionel had become more protective than ever. He called every night at 9 p.m., asking how her classes were, if the professors were treating her well, if she needed a driver to stay close. Rena often laughed softly, telling him she was fine, that she could walk to the bus stop like every other student. But one day, a white SUV pulled beside her near the school gate, and the driver, a tall man in D'Souza livery, said, "Your father says no more walking in the sun." Rena didn't argue. She just slid into the back seat and whispered, "Thanks, Daddy," though he wasn't even there. One afternoon, she returned home early to surprise him. She entered through the front this time, not the service door she used to sneak through. As she walked up the steps, she heard voices from the study. "Nicole, you gave her my room, you gave her Mom's jewelry box, and now you're giving her your time. What do I even mean to you anymore?" Lionel's voice was calm but firm. "You mean everything to me, Nikki. You always have. But I can't undo the past. Rena didn't steal anything. She's just part of us. I don't want her to be. She already is." Rena froze. She didn't want to hear more. She backed away quietly and left the house before anyone saw her. That night, she slept in her dorm. At school, she began to thrive. Slowly, quietly. She answered questions when no one else dared to. She stayed back after class to volunteer in the anatomy lab. She read late into the night. When one of her classmates fainted during a dissection, Rena caught him before he hit the floor and stabilized his breathing with the calm of someone who had once tended to a sick mother night after night. The professors began to notice. One day, her clinical instructor, Dr. Maduka, pulled her aside. "You have the hands of a surgeon," he said. "But more importantly, you have the heart of a healer. Don't ever let anyone cheapen that. Rena smiled. It was the first time she felt seen for who she was, not where she came from. Back home, small cracks began to heal. One afternoon, Julian passed her in the hallway and stopped. He looked at her, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. I compiled some of my old pharmacology notes. They helped me when I was in uni. You might find them useful. Rena blinked, stunned. Thank you, she said, softly. Don't read too much into it, he said, walking away. I just don't like failing D'Souza's. But it was a start. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a Sunday, and Lionel had insisted all his children be present. The table was full. Goat pepper soup, jollof rice, grilled tilapia, wine. Everyone sat, stiff but present. Nicole said nothing for most of the meal, then finally placed her fork down. You were right, she said, looking at Lionel. She's not going anywhere. Lionel nodded. Nicole turned to Rena. So, what's your plan? You get your degree and then what? Join the board of D'Souza Holdings? Rena shook her head. No, I want to open a free clinic one day, in my mother's name, back in Ajagunle, for girls who can't afford to dream yet. There was a pause. Then, to everyone's shock, Nicole smiled. Tightly, but real. That's actually noble, she said. But you better make sure it's properly funded. You know how public health goes in this country. I know, Rena said. And I'm learning. Lionel raised his glass. To Adiobi's girls, both of them, he said. Strong, unbreakable, and finally, together, they drank. That night, Rena sat in her room, staring at her old necklace and smiling through the tears. Healing wasn't a miracle. It was a series of tiny acts. Teacups, flash drives, smirks that turned into nods, rooms once filled with knives, now filled with laughter. She was still scarred, but not shattered. And for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. The sun rose slowly over the rust-red earth of Ajagunle, its golden light bathing the village in a warm, familiar glow. The air smelled like earth after rain and burning firewood, and the gentle cooing of doves echoed across the nearby mango groves. Rena stood still for a long moment at the edge of the cemetery hill, letting the wind touch her face. She hadn't been back here in almost 2 years. Not since everything changed. She now wore a white Ankara gown with soft blue flower prints, modest, comfortable, and stitched by a local tailor whose shop she used to sweep for pocket change. But her hands were no longer blistered. Her shoes weren't broken at the heel. Her heart, though bruised, was whole. Beside her stood Lionel D'Souza, tall in a simple cream-colored caftan, holding a bouquet of pure white lilies. His salt and pepper beard had grown fuller. His voice had grown gentler. But today, he was quiet, reverent. In his other arm, he held a small infant wrapped in white. Rena walked the rest of the way toward the familiar grave at the far end of the field, the one with a handmade stone slab and tiny chipped cross, surrounded by overgrown grass. She knelt, wiping the stone clean with her sleeve. The inscription had faded, but she didn't need to read it. She had memorized every word. Ada Obi, Chica D'Souza, a mother, a fighter, a wild rose. Rena placed a fresh photo in a small wooden frame at the base of the headstone, one taken at her medical graduation a few months ago. She was smiling, her white coat folded neatly over her arm, Lionel standing proudly beside her. It was the same photo now framed in his office. "Mama," Rena whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I made it." She didn't say more. She couldn't. Her throat swelled with the weight of years, of silence, of survival. Her fingers traced the edge of the grave like she was holding her mother's hand again. Lionel stepped forward, slowly lowering the bouquet onto the soil. He stood silently for a few seconds, then spoke, voice rough with memory. I'm sorry, Adaobi. I didn't find you in time, but I found her, and she's everything you said she would be. Smart, brave, stubborn, and so much stronger than I ever deserved. He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the gravestone. I carry you with me every day. I see you in her. Rena stood and turned to the small bundle in Lionel's arms. He handed the baby to her with a smile that trembled at the corners. She looked down at her daughter, 6 weeks old, eyes wide and curious, skin soft like rose petals. Her cheeks were round, her lips tiny, and her eyes, those eyes, deep brown, filled with a calm wisdom that reminded Rena of night conversations under mosquito nets and the lull of her mother's voice humming hymns. She has your eyes, Mama, Rena whispered. So we named her Chica Adana de Souza, after you. God is supreme, daughter of her mother. The wind stirred gently through the leaves, as if the earth had sighed in approval. They stood together in the stillness. 3 generations of love. One in the soil, one in the wind, one in Rena's arms. Back in Lagos, life had transformed. Rena now co-managed the D'Souza Foundation's health initiative, launching clinics across rural regions. Her first was built right here in Ajagunle, just a stone's throw from the tiny shack where she once watched her mother suffer silently through fever and pain. The new clinic had a metal plaque on its entrance, the Adaobi Wild Rose Free Clinic for every girl who dared to dream in the dark. It was funded entirely by Rena's own foundation account, a trust Lionel created in her name, but one she only used for the projects that meant something to her heart. Nicole, after years of tension and silent battles, had changed in subtle ways. The night Rena delivered her baby, Nicole had shown up unexpectedly at the hospital, holding a tiny white onesie stitched with "Little Healer" across the chest. She didn't say much, just placed the gift in Rena's lap and said, "She'll do greater things than all of us." Julian was now one of the board directors overseeing the pharmaceutical wing of the D'Souza empire. He called Rena frequently, not just about business, but for advice. They weren't exactly best friends, but he had grown into a protective older brother, sometimes silently attending her community health seminars just to observe. Isabel became her closest companion. She often babysat Chica and had an entire folder on her phone dedicated to silly videos of the baby. She once joked, "I didn't sign up to be an aunt, but here we are, and she's the only baby I'd wake up at 3 a.m. for." Rena's world had changed completely, but she hadn't. She still cooked beans the way her mother taught her, still read her diary when she was overwhelmed, still took long walks without shoes when it rained, letting the mud remind her of where she began. At night, she often sat on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the city glow beneath the stars. Sometimes Lionel would call. Sometimes Isabel would drop by with takeout. And sometimes she would sit alone, baby Chica sleeping softly in her arms, and talk to the stars. "Mama, we're okay," she'd say. "I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living." And in those quiet, moonlit moments, Rena knew. The girl who once scrubbed floors in silence was now a mother, a doctor, a sister, a daughter, a legacy reborn. And most of all, the girl with her mother's eyes had finally found her place in the world. The end.